I want to start out by emphasizing you can feel very alone around a lot of people. I think I've felt that way for a while, maybe my whole life in a way, where um, where I felt like growing up, I always had to make someone laugh or wake them out of their world. Like I was not necessarily proving anyone anything. Um, Maybe myself, right? Trying to get attention. Um, but I realized that when I realized after observing this sort of behavior in my life where I was constantly trying to, I guess, be seen or be understood, because no matter how I tried to connect with people on, I guess, their level or on like a cultural norm sort of level, I never could. And I guess society will have you feeling that there's something very wrong with that. And a lot of people, I think, just get forced into changing their behavior and settling for less and never really truly unlocking themselves, conquering themselves. Because I think when you really look at this system and this life we have set up, it does not favor anyone who is not willing. How do I say it does not favor anyone, but those who are willing. It favors the the conformity that comes from trying to exploit or benefit from this system, from this societal electrical system, the government system, the money system. And there's going to be, I think if you're anything like me who's trying to build something, trying to not necessarily find a way out, but trying to tunnel my way through, if you will, head first, no fear, maybe a flashlight, maybe maybe I'll stop in the middle of this fucking tunnel and eat some good food. Excuse me. I so far I thought I thought in my life that I really wanted to. At first, I wanted to be in a band, make music, right? But I didn't necessarily know that feeling isn't gone. By the way, I love music. I'd love to be in a band, make music. But this first like ideological, um, my ideological position in this first experience with music was very ego driven, very standardized, and I don't think I was doing I don't think I was doing anything different, right? But I was the only one who had the balls to get up and sing and connect and talk to other people. And I still feel like I am that way, which that was a really good thing to discover about myself, in my opinion. Um, I now feel like I can really operate in conversation easily. Um, Another thing I realized from this sort of that, excuse me, that ripple event, I like to call, where I was like heavily chasing music and image and ego. Another thing I learned was how people really just want someone to listen to follow, because conveying anything themselves can only work if they believe that it's their idea. And I guess I didn't really want to be a traditional artist or music maker or creative in the sense that I would go to these bars and clubs and venues and perform for a bunch of drunk people, people who are recording the shows more than watching it, um, people who are not they're not any different from me and you. That's the main point. There's no difference. There's really no difference between these people. It's just such a perceptual thing. It isn't necessarily it's not easy to unlock, that's for sure. It takes a little jump, it takes a little action within the present moment, a little trickery within yourself, if you will. But I realized I didn't want to like keep doing this thing that people have already been doing for the same reasons that I wanted to do them, because I think a lot of these musicians have the same beliefs that I did, which was, to change something, to bring something new, and not to bring something new, but to bring something new to my experience, right? And fame, money, image, transcending time, being seen, all these things are a part of the process of being a musician or an artist or creative. And that's not what I'm here to argue against, but I'm here to argue why I don't feel like that's my goal and why I want to shoot for something bigger. It's not that I'm hesitant to give out this idea. I think it's a very good idea that anyone should act upon. But I want to first say this to sort of tie in what I'm trying to say or build is the world made for everyone is the world made for no one. The world made for everyone is the world made for no one. So it's not that our system prioritizes gender or race or personality. It's not that. Our systems sort of create the effect on the environment, and that effect sort of ripples into this behavior of wanting to be seen, wanting an image to build, right? Wanting a following, wanting to go somewhere you're not already. And it really struck me because I went to a bunch of these shows. I remember going to my like first hardcore show, first like really heavy metal show. Really transcended my time. This cool venue that is local. It's very similar to the idea I'm building off of, but it is a venue that's very community driven in its artistic uh, view. Um, but it's catered towards everyone and everything. You know, we have, I think in Indiana or Indianapolis, we have a very dominant hardcore metal, hardcore punk scene. I could get into that. I really want to. But of course, there's other things, right? But this venue doesn't necessarily cater towards anything. It just caters towards everything, and it gives the space for everyone. And I was confused why that bothered me when I first like found out about this place and went to it, and experienced it, and I've experienced multiple genres. At first, why I never resonated with the hardcore scene was very much the fact that it's a bunch of people screaming and like playing really fast and loud and like distorting their voices and like I can't explain it until you're there, right? But why this bothered me, but why this first struck my eye, mind's eye or my mind. Um, if you just look at the progression of music ever since the birth of jazz and rock and roll, things have gotten faster. Different scenes have popped up. The '90s brought raves, which was very interesting. Um, I mean, now in the 2000s, in the 2010s, and the 2020s, we are progressing and kind of digressing or degressing. I forget. I digress. I think we're digressing in in some ways, but we're progressing in others. I was having a conversation at a pub near me with a man. Um, plays in a band actually, pretty successful local hardcore band. And yeah, I said to him, I was like, I think in this day and age, we don't see enough experimenting. And I didn't convey this properly to him then, but I had to sit with it. And he goes, "Man, I think that's the exact opposite. We see so much experimental shit, music wise, art wise." And I was like, "Why don't I agree to that?" And it's because they all are being held. All these acts and all these art shows and whatnot are being held in the same fucking areas as everything. There's no like private. I wouldn't even say private. There's no specific area for these acts. And if you know anything about movies or like TV shows or story building or world building in video games, the environment is fucking everything. Like everything. Everything. I love a movie or a show or a little abstract experimental film where I'm just like, oh, that's tasty. Literally, literally tasty. I'm like obsessed with the environment of it. Um, so, how do we even begin to build an environment to hold a specific art, a specific sound, a specific creation? First, it takes money, money and a little willpower, which I'm sort of building slowly. I'm doubting myself. I'm not gonna lie to you. This idea is a little. It's like, oh my god, Jacob, just go join a band, go sing. But I keep coming back to that same realization. I'm just like these people don't. These people aren't striving for anything new. They're striving for the same 40 people to view them every night. They're striving for the same drunk highs and the cigarettes and the being seen on TikTok and Instagram. But I'm working on this idea, I guess, of creating a space specifically for my art and sound and music. Obviously, I don't know how big this place is going to be or what the fuck is going to hold it. I've thought of designs, right? I think designing and sort of talking about it with your fellow people, with yourself is very important. My first contemplation is getting people there, and um, also one of my main goals is like to not charge people. I don't want it to be a monetary system. I want people to go to this place and leave the society, leave the system behind. There's no system. There's no need for your phone screen here. There's no need for your fucking political dogma. Language would be preferred to be secondary in our expression. It's really hard to build these things because you have to consider so many fucking things about setting up. Obviously, we're not even near the building, but you have to be able to plan on that. You have to be able to plan in order to execute when that opportunity arises. So I'm virtually just planning for this execution because if I get a chance to get my hands on a building, all else is fucking out the window. It's all wheels are on go. All I'm going forward. I used to hate theatrics and music. I used to think it was very phony. I'm not gonna lie. I think that a lot of it is phony. Phony for the wrong reasons. Like David Bowie. I used to have a very naive opinion of him. I don't love all of his music, but his sort of performative behavior was foreign to me growing up, and it wasn't until I got out of my shell, got out of my little world where I was like, this man, I like this man. He has some shit to say. And then fast forward in time, and you're in the 2010s, 2000s, 2020s, whatever. Performative takes on a new fucking role, man. Performative is not even the word to describe what the fuck is going on. There's a non all audience that I think everyone lives in their head with. Like everyone's constantly thinking about perception of how they're being perceived in some way, shape, or form. And this kind of ties in to my argument that from the print culture to into the movie culture, out of the movie culture, which held the print culture. You have to realize that the print culture created books and stories, and the word was the world, right? The movie held the print, transformed the word into an image, but based on lack of context, the acting, I would say, when first movies became a thing, um, there was no sound in them. They were very like just music over them, silent films, which I think is so fucking cool. So those sort of movies became more of like silent movies. They were more of a description of what should happen, and then the actor or actors or actresses would carry out the description, and then we moved towards more of a story formatted type of movie, and we got to visualize and see images of emotions that we were dealing with, and out of this movie culture, which I can only speak so much on because I was born in 2005, for crying out loud. The movie culture, which held the print culture, moved into this sort of TV culture. Now, the difference between these two cultures, these two different types of people, was or is that movie people, like the movie itself, is capturing a tone, a setting, a vibration, and perfecting it in a way, really capturing it. Now, when you move towards the TV culture, the TV held the movie, right? The movies held the print. So now the TV sort of has this impact on a few different channels of impact. And obviously, when you start to realize how television is operating, you change between channels and you tune in. I'm forgetting the radio, by the way. The radio was a part of this whole thing. I often forget the radio was before the movie. Um, so that could be another thing you could add in before the movie is the print into the radio, radio into the movie. Arguably interchangeable. Because you heard when once you could hear someone and hear their like intention, that was a big difference. But movies sort of performed as an act. There no one could really see the true nature of the people. Um, and TV sort of broke this veil with combining radio, movie, print, um, because you could watch a movie on a television in your home. You could also listen to news, which could be translated into radio and print, because that's what people were consuming. They were reading the newspaper, they were listening to the radio in the morning. Um, so now the television could do this and provide these images and this story and the narrative. And those sort of like that in itself birthed a creative response. Because I think true creatives, true artists, shamans, wizards, whatever the fuck you want to use, witches, I don't give a fuck. It allowed artists to really play the game and to play with the environment, if you will. Say, like, you have a record, a vinyl record. You have to pick it up, you're holding the record, you're looking at the record. And say I held it, I could grab a record, but you see like see all these posters. Just imagine those as records. Um, you could pick up the record. You could drop the needle on the record and put it on the record player. Drop the needle, play it. Sounds come out. No images except the album cover and whatever else information was provided via the album. When albums and CDs and tapes became the dominant force of communication of sort of the underground, I would say, um, it wasn't that it became anything different than what it was aimed to set out to do. It was that the effect of those machines, technologies, whatever the fuck you want to call them, inventions, mediums, the effect of those things created an invisible environment amongst ourselves that was really, you can't really put your finger on it. And what I find interesting about um, the, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, because the 60s you have these hippies, Vietnam War, um, and music was almost at a peak of self exploration. There were so many things happening, so many areas that it's hard to really just quantify together, um, which I think is a really interesting thing for outside sources to benefit off of. Um, but your individual connection to the album, to the tape or the CD, whatever it held, was your connection. It was your direct pipeline. Think about that. Sit with that. We move forward in time. Music is expanding. More people are creating shit. Stuff is getting faster, first of all. Music's getting faster. More machines, more sounds, more noise, more innovation. But everything's being held in the same area: bars, clubs, venues. And then you have this idea of raves, right? Raves were very different, full on environments that were literally sometimes underground, and it was the community that held them and ran them and that controlled the image and the narrative and that was super important. I wish I could have experienced the peak of that, but never again. And while raves were really taking place, um, the raves sort of extended out of the psychedelic movement. There was a lot of psychedelic heads having very psychedelic experiments with music. I know there were. The Grateful Dead were a great basic band to observe. A band called Hawkwind was another good band to really analyze what they were doing at their shows. But when you view raves and when you view raves as an environment dictated completely with a new culture, new sounds, a new momentum, and you don't take the weight of the outside world inside with you, the world almost ceases to exist. In a sense, in a sense, completely perceptual sense, sort of way. And why I think that's very important to understand is to realize where we're going after these digital worlds really put the effect on us and create this invisible landscape, invisible environment. which it already has created, but things progress. The 90s held TV in a much more abstract, influential pipeline, like access to the pipeline, access to the scene, access to the community, like MTV and more news channels and more TV shows and more movies. It's just more and more and more. I'm less familiar with the cultures and what the scenes of the 2000s, I'd say. But I know that in the 90s and into the 2000s, hip hop and rap, and the 2010s and 2020s still hold the hip hop and rap um, as a very dominant um, forefront of culture. It's hard to analyze these last 26 years of the 2000s because I haven't heard too many people talk about these things. I know there's people out there talking about them somewhere, but I just haven't heard or met anyone in my life that can think long enough to form a topic, to form an idea on a topic. It's sad, but it's true. Um, I think in the 2000s and up until now, you have to broaden your perspective of technology and electric systems. You can't really necessarily look at individual scenes because the 60s psychedelic movement, right? In a dramatic sense, that was that was a collection, a community of a technological system that was knitted and webbed together by language and sound and noise. If you really want to dramatize, that's what technology is. That's what these screens do. Is it's a collection of circuitry and of natural metals and earth components to create a communal base of meaning and source. Last 26 years in the 2000s, every scene, every community, every artistic movement now had a direct pipeline to it. Now, instead of it just being sound and noise, an image of the album cover, you could interact with people's perspectives and argue and have instantaneous communication. You could blend genres in seconds. You didn't have to listen to a full album ever. You could, create a mixtape or a playlist, and that sort of broke down the album experience, and people became more fascinated with songs and good sounds instead of like the formation of an album. Let alone their attention spans couldn't fucking sit there long enough for an album. But now, when the individual awakes or awoke to the scene, awoke to the moment, whatever. When the individual awakes to their purpose of discovering themselves in art or music, they have the direct pipeline, the direct connection to it, whatever they want, and they can bounce between it all, right? Before these screens and electric communication, we had to directly access those technologies, those communities. Now they indirectly access us because there's more of them. There's more of these machines and screens than there are communities that are physically taking shape. So a lot of these scenes are so mental, A lot of these communities are so mental, belief systems are so mental that the physical environment doesn't have any sort of downloaded form of culture. It's really just an automated, like, I needed to build this here because I needed money. I needed to do this. I needed that. There's no story behind it. There's no grand narrative. So a lot of our beauty in our world is completely mental now. And a lot of people have this beauty inside them, this expression, this community. Um, Simply that the want or need to access this community, right? In all sorts, not just music or creation or art. Every bit of the fucking world of community and tribalism and formation of group, you can access it. Whether it's true or not, you can access it. With that playing field in mind, you can't operate in the same patterns or the same areas to sort of reach these heights or reach a new height. And that's why it bothers me so much when people say that, oh, we need such experimental multiculturalism and we need to just have every space for everyone. I'm not sure if there's a narrative or an agenda being pushed, but that does not sound pleasing. Not at all. I'm not really sure how to word this next part, but say you had back then, when newspapers were the dominant force, right? Or at least when there was like one news channel you had to connect to on the TV, or you had to listen to the radio at a specific time to catch the news or to catch what's up and what's happening. Say that, right? That was your connection. 4 o'clock, turn on the news. 4 o'clock, turn on the radio. Oh, the newspaper comes in the morning. Okay, that's what I'm going to do, right? With that being eliminated, first of all, time has become much more exchangeable or interchangeable with feelings of contentment and reaching everlasting highs of all sorts. Because there wasn't a worry, or there isn't a worry about like not catching up with the world because we can whenever, right? And I haven't even mentioned short form content because that's such a new thing in the last 10 years, or 8 years, you could argue, 7 years. So I hope if you're watching this in some time, this is making sense and I'm breaking ground. This is just me working through the idea. With nothing being set in a schedule, it comes from our ability to determine our meaning and to determine our perception to be acted and directed towards something that is our desire. Now, before the change of technology and screens and instantaneous communication, you have to realize that no one had the connection inside their homes of the world. The world was much, much smaller. in a mental way, right? There's a quote um, by Terence McKenna. He says about something along the lines of, if you're like, as you build the bonfire, or as the flame gets bigger and bigger, the more darkness is revealed. And to me, that's a very mind bending thing. The darkness was there back then because there was access to information and light and creation, right? But you had to actually travel physically to reach this sort of light, to reach the communication, to reach the expression. It's not that darkness isn't communication or expression, but it's a different type of it. Um, it's formless in all aspects. It's chaos. It's absurdity. You can't really capture it. It just happens amongst the landscape or playing field. With everyone now having access to this communication, to this expression, to the light, to the screen, the darkness has become so much more enticing because there's so much of it. And I'm not talking about bad and good. I'm not talking about right and wrong. I'm talking about cultural fires, societal or civilizations or cities, governments that are seeking form, right? There's so much of it now that the darkness is hovering over it all at all times. What that darkness is to me is the mystery of language. Fucking moth in my room. The mystery of space, the mystery of us, civilization, humans, the mystery of our creations. We're just creating short form content, artificial intelligences, and machines that are just, there's a robot just marking shelves at Kroger. You know what I mean? Who the fuck's seeing that? Um, there's robots on campuses delivering food to college students. I'm just throwing shit out there, but what I'm trying to build is the creation of anything does not reside in the darkness or the light. It just resides. It's the middle ground. It's the in between the yin and the yang, if you will. And depending upon our environments is where we tend to draw these creations towards. It's where the perception holds the creation that is where we can really distinguish the beauty or the symbols or the cause and effects of said creations. But our environment now is so dictated by like a government entity, a system that is not, it doesn't have a form. We are the form. This could have been 3 minutes, and I could have said, we need to start building larger art projects to hold ourselves. And I could have just said that. But I think it's a much more complex process of distinguishing our perception of our environment and how it's directly affecting people. Carry on.